Story 1: The Target. I once worked deep in the shadows of the dark web. I won't explain how I got into it. What matters is that my job was simple, cold, and horrifying. I was paid to track down people, abduct them, and deliver them to undisclosed locations. I never asked what happened to them afterward, but deep down, I knew the answer. None of it ended well. Over the years, I became numb. What once shocked me became routine. My only concern was the generous pay. I didn't work alone either. I had a partner, an older man who called himself Dale. He'd been in the game far longer than I had. We met through one of the dark web forums. He needed someone younger and stronger to help with the more physically demanding jobs, and I needed guidance, so we partnered up. It didn't take long for us to become an efficient machine. We'd get contacted through encrypted threads, given a target and minimal background info. Then we'd scout, plan, grab, and deliver. Rinse and repeat. Each job fed our wallets, and as terrible as it was, it paid enough for both of us to live comfortably. We never made mistakes, until one night. Our employer, anonymous as always, sent us a target. A 19-year-old boy named Liam, living in a wealthy suburb. That wasn't strange. We've taken kids from rich families before. Most of them ended up ransomed or trafficked. But this job was different. The instructions were precise. Liam had no security system, but do not underestimate him. Use extreme caution. He is extremely dangerous. The most bizarre part? They demanded we use carfentanil, an elephant tranquilizer. One dose could kill a grown man. We weren't hitmen. Dale and I never crossed that line. We assumed the client was just being dramatic or didn't understand how tranquilizers worked. So we used a weaker, safer sedative instead. That was our first mistake. We began our surveillance the next day. Liam rarely left his house. He stayed inside, reading, gaming, watching TV, completely unremarkable, a shut-in. He lived with his parents, but they were never home. We couldn't see what made him dangerous. The night of the extraction, we parked our van near his house. Dale stayed up front, while I positioned myself in the back, aiming the tranquilizer rifle through the open doors. I had a perfect shot into the kitchen window. Sure enough, Liam appeared, pouring himself a glass of water. I fired. The dart struck his neck. His reaction was unsettling. He flinched slightly, but didn't scream. He pulled the dart out and looked at it, calmly, curiously. Then he turned and stared directly at me, not through the window, at me. His green eyes locked on mine, and his expression said everything. I know you're here. Come closer. I dare you. Then he turned off the light and vanished. Dale got out of the van with the capture gear. I told him something felt wrong, but he brushed it off. He's a spoiled brat in a big house. Let's get this over with. We entered through the back door. The place was dark and eerily quiet. The kitchen was empty, save for the glass of water on the counter. No sign of Liam. We searched the house. Nothing. He should have passed out by now. Are you sure you hit him? I saw the dart go in. He pulled it out. Then where the hell is he? Before I could answer, we heard it. Heavy footsteps thudding across the second floor. They were fast, unnatural. We split up to investigate. I headed toward the living room and saw something strange. A pile of clothes on the floor. Liam's clothes. He had stripped naked. Why? No idea. There was no tactical reason. Just his clothes, neatly placed, as if he had deliberately shed them. Then Dale screamed. It was a gut-wrenching, panicked scream from deep inside the house. I sprinted toward it and found him halfway down the basement stairs, clawing at the wall. Something was dragging him downward. I only saw a shadow, long limbs and unnatural strength, before it yanked him out of view. I tried the light. Nothing. Power was out. Then, the silence. Dale had stopped screaming. I knew I should run, but I couldn't leave him. I descended into the basement with my flashlight shaking in my hands. The beam revealed something I will never forget. Hanging from a metal bar was a creature. Humanoid in shape, but horribly wrong. Its arms were too long, ending in claws. Its body looked like stretched skin barely clinging to bones. Its legs were jointed in ways no human should. And in its grasp was Dale, limp, shredded, barely recognizable. The thing was eating him, ripping chunks from his body and chewing with sickening crunches. Then it looked up at me. Its face was smeared with blood. Its mouth hung open, unhinged, jagged teeth visible in the flickering light. Its eyes were sunken, but beneath the blood and twisted features, I saw something familiar. Green eyes, blonde hair, and freckles. It was Liam. The dart hadn't knocked him out because he wasn't human. Not anymore. We had been sent to capture a monster. Why the employer wanted him alive, I don't know, but as I stared into those inhuman eyes, I realized I had made a terrible mistake by not using the elephant tranquilizer. It probably wouldn't have worked anyway. The creature screeched, and I ran. I sprinted up the stairs, out the door, into the van, and sped off without looking back. I didn't stop until I crossed 3 state lines. That night, I erased my life, burned every document, emptied my accounts, changed my name, got plastic surgery, wiped every trace of who I was. I vanished. But Liam, or whatever he had become, still haunts my nightmares. Every time I close my eyes, I see that face. And I know something is still out there, somewhere.
Story 2: The Naughty List. A few winters ago, when the nights seemed colder and the bitterness in my chest had finally hardened into something cruel, I did something I never thought I was capable of. Something shameful. Something I now carry like a rotting weight chained to my conscience. I hadn't always been that person. I wasn't always the man who looked at another human being with resentment powerful enough to wish them harm. But pain, real pain, the kind that festers when love curdles into abandonment, can transform the mind into something feral. And that's exactly what happened when Emily left me. We had been together for 4 years. Through hardship and uncertainty, I stood by her. I supported her when her family disowned her, when her debts piled high, when she lost her job and spiraled into depression. I opened my home to her, helped her piece her life back together, and carried her burdens like they were my own. She had become not only my partner, but my purpose. And when she ended it, quietly, coldly, and without warning, it felt like everything I had invested had been for nothing. No screaming match, no cheating scandal, just a short message and silence. At first, I thought she might come back, that it was a momentary lapse of judgment. But days passed and then weeks, and instead of regret, all I saw on her social media was joy, laughter, new friends, new hobbies. photos filled with light while I sunk further into the dark. It was like I had been surgically removed from her life with not even a scar left behind. I stopped eating. I stopped shaving. I stopped answering my friends. But more than anything else, I couldn't stop thinking about her face when she told me goodbye. That casual smile, that look of relief, like she had finally shed a burden. One night, after too much cheap whiskey and too many hours staring at the same pictures of her online, I opened the Tor browser. I'd used it before, years ago, out of curiosity. But tonight I wasn't curious. I was vengeful. I didn't have a plan, not really. I didn't know what I was looking for, only that I needed to feel power again. Control. I had let her have too much of my heart, and now I wanted to take something back. I browsed for hours, descending past drug forums and scam sites until I found something that caught my attention. A crude-looking page with a grainy header reading, "The Naughty List." It was themed like a twisted Christmas card. A cartoon Santa, eyes glowing red, with a bag not filled with toys but writhing bodies. The tagline read, "They know when you've been bad. Let Santa decide the punishment." The site had categories: elf surveillance, Krampus call, stocking stuffers, and finally, Slay Snatcher. It was absurd. A parody, I told myself. Just another dark web role-playing forum for bored degenerates. But something about it gripped me. Maybe it was the way the words flickered when you hovered your cursor. Maybe it was the dozens of anonymized submissions, people doxing exes, old bosses, distant relatives. Maybe it was how desperate I was to stop feeling helpless. I clicked Slay Snatcher. The page that loaded was stark white, but the form fields were bathed in blood red hue. There was no real explanation, just a message at the top that read, "Santa's sack must be filled. Naughty boys and girls will ride with him through the night. Provide what's needed. No takebacks. No mercy." The form asked for her name, social media links, a location, photos, and a description of her sins. I stared at it for a long time. I felt the weight of what I was doing, and for a brief moment I considered closing the page. But then I remembered the smile in her most recent photo, the one where she looked truly happy for the first time in years without me. So I filled it in. Emily Carter, 27. Instagram handle, Facebook profile. Photos, some intimate, some not. The ones we took together that no one else had seen. Location, Benton Hill, our shared hometown. I didn't include an exact address. I thought that made it okay.
Location, Benton Hill, our shared hometown. I didn't include an exact address. I thought that made it okay. And then I clicked Submit. The screen froze for several seconds, then flashed black. A single sentence appeared. Santa never forgets. He checks the list twice. Below that, in smaller, flickering font, it read, "Thank you for feeding the sack." I closed the window, cleared my browser, scrubbed the cache, and for a brief moment, I felt lighter. Not proud, not relieved, just less hollow. I told myself it was a joke, some sick interactive fiction forum. I told myself it would never lead to anything. But that didn't last long. 3 days later, 2 police detectives knocked on my door. They didn't accuse me. Not directly. They just wanted to talk. Asked when I last spoke to Emily. Asked if we had broken up on bad terms. Asked if I had any reason to contact her recently. I answered as calmly as I could. Told them it had been weeks. Told them I had no idea where she was, which technically was true. But when they left, something inside me cracked. I tried to find the site again. Typed every combination I could remember. It was gone. Not offline. Gone. Scrubbed from the network like it had never existed. Then came the news. Her body was discovered nearly a week later, crammed into a crumbling chimney inside an abandoned Christmas village just outside town. The place had been condemned for years. The police only found her after a group of urban explorers called in a smell. She was naked. Her skin was marred with frostbite and something else, branding marks shaped like snowflakes and candy canes, and in her mouth, wrapped tightly in her own hair, was a handwritten note. Emily Carter, naughty, delivered, snowflake, Santa. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was numb. In the weeks that followed, I stopped leaving my apartment. I disconnected from everything and everyone. The police never came back. There were no leads, no suspects, no evidence. But I knew. I knew it was me. My submission, my cruelty. I had handed her over to something ancient and merciless that wore the skin of a joke. Even now, I don't understand what that site really was. Was it run by a cartel? A cult? A lone predator with connections? Or was it something older? Some nights, when the wind howls and the air feels colder than it should, I think about that final message. Santa never forgets. And I wonder if he remembers me too. Because sometimes, in the early hours, I hear footsteps outside my window, heavy boots crunching in the frost. Once I woke to find a single sooty handprint on my living room wall, above the fireplace I never use. Sometimes, when I sleep, I dream of a sleigh, not bright red, but dark and splintered, dragged by pale, emaciated reindeer whose eyes glow the color of old wounds. And in the back of that sleigh, I see Emily curled in the sack like a forgotten doll. Her eyes are open, and she's smiling, but not at me, at something behind me. I don't know how much longer I can live like this. I have no desire to confess, no courage to kill myself. I exist in limbo, haunted by the knowledge that I summoned something into the world and gave it a name. Maybe it was always there. Maybe it needed me to believe in it again. And now I do. I believe. Not in the kind of Santa who brings gifts, but in the one who takes people away.
Story 3. Static Signal. An expanded dark web horror story. 5,163 words, optimized for voiceover narration. Before the world became obsessed with instant answers, streaming videos, and infinite scrolls, the internet had a different flavor. It was raw, unpolished, almost mystical, a place where curiosity could be dangerous and knowledge didn't always come free. This story comes from that earlier time, when the edges of the web were still rough, when doors weren't labeled, and if you knocked, you didn't always like what opened. My name is Elliot Vale, and back in college, I was the quiet tech guy. I lived in baggy hoodies and cheap headphones, my hair always one haircut past acceptable. While other students were out drinking or playing intramural sports, I was buried in my laptop, surfing places I should never have found. Not just weird forums or pirated game sites,
I mean the real underbelly, the dark web. I didn't go there for drugs or weapons. I wasn't in it for the money. For me, it was about the unknown, the unseen, the things no one talks about. There was a thrill in unlocking secrets no one else even knew existed. I like to say I was chasing ghosts through code, but looking back, I think I was the one being hunted. It started on a freezing night in December, the kind of night where the silence outside your dorm window feels too complete. I was buried deep in an IRC thread about zero visibility frequencies, basically lost internet radio stations no longer broadcasted publicly, but allegedly still active in secret corners of the dark web. Most were dead air, some played bizarre music on loops, but one user, just a random string of characters, posted something different. 0x13, still active. They always listen. You don't tune into it, it tunes into you. Below it was a link. listen.deep/0x13channel.oni. It looked broken. Obscure extension, no security certificate. It shouldn't have even loaded. But it did. The screen went black, then blinked twice. No images, just a pulsing white command line that read, "Tuning frequency, please wait." And then, the static started. It wasn't like normal white noise. There were layers to it, depth, movement, like listening to wind howl across a frozen canyon with something breathing just beneath it. I leaned in closer, eyes squinting at the screen. Then, I heard it. A voice. Faint, garbled, whispers threaded through the static like thin wires. At first, I couldn't make out any words. It just sounded like someone talking underwater, far away. Until the whisper shifted. It spoke my name. Elliot. I ripped my headphones off. The room was still. No one outside the window, no sound in the hall, just my reflection on the blank laptop screen, pale and wide-eyed. It had to be a trick, a script scraping my computer for system info. That had to be it. But the voice, it hadn't sounded artificial. There was weight behind it, like breath on cold glass. I shut the browser, cleared everything, and restarted my system. Paranoia clawed at my spine. Still, I convinced myself it was just a well-coded prank, a scare tactic, nothing more. The next night, I couldn't help myself. I went back. This time the static came faster, and so did the voice. "You're back, Elliot. Good. Now we can listen together." My fingers hovered over the power key, but I didn't press it. Something about the voice, it wasn't threatening. Not exactly. It sounded curious, like it had been waiting for me. The screen changed again. A line of code scrolled by. Connection, SYN. Listening, active. Echo signal detected. Then came the whisper. "We found another one. Soon it will be your turn." That was enough. I killed the power, ripped the Ethernet cable out of the wall, and didn't sleep for 2 days. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The figure, the voice, the way it had spoken to me like we were old friends, like we were bound together by some shared secret. Then, the dreams started. At first, they were just fragments, white rooms, flickering lights, muffled static. But each night, they grew longer, more vivid. In them, I was always sitting in the metal chair, facing a dark mirror, and in that mirror, I'd see my reflection change, not gradually, but violently, my skin cracking like glass, my eyes leaking static, and always, just behind me, a tall figure, cloaked in flickering pixels, watching. I tried to quit cold turkey, threw out my headphones, blocked the ports, deleted Tor, but the static found other ways in. I'd hear it on dead TV channels. I'd hear it when I stood near reflective surfaces. Once while riding the campus shuttle late at night, I glanced at the security camera feed in the corner, and for a brief second, I saw the chair. That same flickering chair on the screen, replacing my seat. I blinked. It was gone. I started to unravel. I stopped attending classes. Friends stopped calling. I avoided mirrors completely, covered them with sheets. But at night, I'd still hear the whispering. Through the walls, through the pipes, through the floor. One night, desperate, I reached out to an old user I remembered from the dark web threads, SpectralNet. He'd posted about similar signals before. I sent him everything, screenshots, audio logs, descriptions. He replied within an hour. You accessed channel 0x13. It's not a broadcast, it's a beacon. They don't transmit information, they transmit frequency awareness. Once you're tuned, they begin mirroring your presence. Turn off all screens, destroy reflective surfaces. Don't let your own signal amplify. Then another message. If you hear the humming, it's already too late. That night, my laptop, powered off and unplugged, turned on by itself. The same window opened, same pulsing text, but now it read, "Signal stabilized. He is coming through." The screen flashed to the live feed again. Only this time, it was my dorm room. I was in the chair, and behind me, the figure had fully emerged. 7 feet tall, wrapped in cables, its face a swirling mess of static, eyes glowing like old CRT burn-in, fingers twitching like antennae. It raised one hand and pointed. The power went out. Everything gone. I woke up on the floor, blood dripping from my nose, my ears ringing like a dying television set. My roommate found me hours later, mumbling to myself, eyes locked on the blank wall. I was hospitalized, diagnosed with acute dissociative paranoia. Nobody believed the story, and I didn't blame them. After discharge, I left college, moved in with my brother 2 states away. I changed my name, never owned another computer. But none of it helped. The signal followed. Sometimes I'll be walking through a grocery store and the PA system will crackle just for a second, and I'll hear it. Elliot. I've unplugged every TV I own, but they still glow faintly at night. I keep my mirrors covered, but sometimes I wake up and they're uncovered again, and my reflection isn't quite right. It smiles too long, it doesn't blink when I do, and when I scream, it keeps its mouth shut. I've learned that 0x13 isn't a channel, it's a threshold, a border between our reality and something else, something that hungers for recognition, something that can't enter our world unless it's seen, heard, believed in. And by listening, I let it in.
Story 4. The Puzzle Box. I've always had a thing for puzzles. Not just jigsaws, but codes, riddles, ciphers. Anything that made my brain ache and stretch. As a kid, I was the one who solved the newspaper Sudoku faster than my parents could find their coffee. I wasn't athletic or social, but give me a locked door, a series of symbols, or a pattern no one else could see, and I was in my element. By the time I reached my late 20s, I was deep into what most people would call advanced cryptography. But what I really specialized in was hidden systems, layers behind layers, Easter eggs, defunct domains, sites swallowed by the web's undercurrent. Most of it was harmless fun, unlocking forgotten websites, finding ARGs created by bored programmers, deciphering dead URLs that looped back into themselves like digital Mobius strips. But in late October of 2016, I stumbled upon something that didn't want to be solved, something that was never meant to be touched. It began when I found a comment buried in the source code of an abandoned webcomic site. The comment read, "If you've come this far, you've already opened the first door. See what lies beneath. Vector.black/pb-entry." It was an unlisted link, dead to most search engines. Just text, no images, no style sheets, no formatting. A blank white page with a single prompt, "Enter your name." I hesitated. Usually these things asked for usernames, maybe an alias, but this was different, personal. Curious, I typed, "Aaron." The page blinked once, then loaded what looked like an ancient text adventure game interface. "Welcome, Aaron. Do you wish to play?" There was a yes and a no. I hovered over no just to see what would happen. The moment my cursor touched it, the screen glitched and turned black. Static filled the speakers. Then the screen pulsed red and displayed, "That's not an option anymore." I clicked yes. The screen shifted. A diagram of a box appeared, black lines etched into a white cube, symbols on each side, runes, clock hands, and strange geometric spirals. Below it, a prompt read, "Solve the box." At first, it seemed simple. You clicked the sides of the cube, rotated them, and aligned the symbols in a particular order, but each solution revealed a new layer, more complex than the last. Every time I thought I'd cracked it, the game changed. It was intelligent. It learned how I solved. It adjusted. The difficulty wasn't linear. It evolved. After 3 hours straight, the background began to fade into something darker. The symbols no longer felt abstract. They started to look familiar, like diagrams from old religious manuscripts, like something ancient was watching me through the code. But I couldn't stop. It had its hooks in me. Eventually, I solved what I thought was the final configuration. The cube cracked open. The screen flashed black and white like a strobe. Then a message appeared. "The box has opened. Thank you for playing, Aaron. Coordinates: 38.8972 north, 7.0369 west. 1 hour. Come alone. Bring nothing." I stared at the screen. Those were real coordinates. I checked Google Maps. It pointed to a narrow alley in Washington, D.C., just behind a condemned theater that had been shut for years. I lived in Baltimore. It was only an hour away by car. I should have ignored it. I should have laughed, called it a brilliant prank by some hacker genius who had crafted the ultimate ARG. But deep inside, I felt something shift, like I'd just unlocked something I was never supposed to see. And worse, I felt watched. I closed my laptop, packed a hoodie, and drove. It was past midnight when I arrived. The city was quiet. Fog curled along the pavement. The alley was narrow and dark. A metal gate leaned off its hinges. Beyond it, I found a wooden crate, no bigger than a shoebox, sitting perfectly centered in the path. It had no markings, just a burnished black surface covered in a thin layer of dust. I picked it up. It was cold, much heavier than it looked. I took it home. That was mistake number 2. Once inside, I set the box on my desk and examined it. No hinges, no seams, just a perfectly smooth cube of dark, almost obsidian-like material. But when I touched it, it responded. Faint glowing symbols flickered beneath the surface, only visible from certain angles. I couldn't stop staring at it. That night, I had dreams. I stood in a vast circular chamber filled with hundreds of identical boxes, each pulsed with a low hum like a mechanical heartbeat. Something moved among them, tall, faceless figures cloaked in black, whispering in a language that made my ears bleed even in sleep. When I woke, my nose was bleeding. I should have thrown it away. Instead, I opened my laptop and went back to the site. It was gone, totally wiped. But the box was still on my desk, humming faintly. Over the next few days, things got worse. The lights in my apartment began flickering, always in the presence of the box. Electronics misfired. My phone would glitch, showing pictures of people I didn't know, blurry, twisted faces in dark rooms. The temperature dropped, not just inside me. I felt it. The presence. Whatever had been locked in that digital construct, it had crossed over. Not physically, but through attention, through solving, through understanding. I had been its final key. The dreams turned into visions, waking ones. I'd blink and the world would stutter, like a scratched DVD. People's faces would smear, words on signs twisted into symbols from the box. I began hearing whispers when no one was around. They always said the same thing: turn the box. And one night, when I finally did, it opened. Not physically, but somehow my mind entered it. I was no longer in my apartment. I was inside a structure, mechanical yet alive, walls shifting, rooms pulsing with breath. It was infinite, a maze of dimensionless corridors lined with faces trapped behind glass, all screaming silently. And in the center, something waited. It had no name, no face, just a form made of language, of logic. It spoke in riddles, in numbers that rearranged themselves into memories I'd forgotten. It knew everything about me, every fear, every lie, every unsolved question that had haunted my life. And it demanded more. The box wasn't a puzzle. It was a gateway. And I had been the solution. When I came to, hours had passed. My nose was bleeding again. So were my ears. And the box was gone. Not missing. Gone. Like it had never been there. But I wasn't the same. Something had stayed behind. Something inside. Now, when I walk past screens, they flicker with symbols, puzzles no one else sees. I hear voices and static. If I hold my breath long enough, I can still feel the walls of that place. And every few nights, someone leaves a small square package outside my door. Always the same weight, always cold to the touch. I don't open them anymore, but I know what they are. Invitations. Each box is meant for someone else. I wasn't the first. I won't be the last. And the worst part? A small part of me still wants to solve them. But I won't, because now I know. Some puzzles solve you.
Story 5. Forbidden Port. Before everything happened, I worked as a penetration tester for a mid-tier cybersecurity firm. You've probably heard of people like me. White hat hackers paid to break into systems, find vulnerabilities, and then report them before the bad guys can exploit them. It was decent money and deeply satisfying work, especially for someone like me who had always been fascinated by secrets hidden in plain sight. My name was Jonah back then. It's not anymore. Most of our contracts were dry. Companies with poorly configured firewalls, outdated CMS platforms, and lazy admin passwords like welcome123. But once in a while, we'd get an unusual job. The kind where no official paperwork existed, where all the documentation came from an anonymous client behind a proxy chain and Bitcoin wallet.
The kind of job that started with, "We were never here." The job in question came through a private drop server with a single request: explore, map, identify threat level, do not interact. Attached was a URL, just an IP address and a port number, 8088. At first glance, it looked like a test server. No domain, no SSL certificate, nothing to flag it as dangerous, just obscure, abandoned. But as any experienced tester knows, ports tell stories, and 8088 wasn't random. It was often used for backdoor dev environments, forgotten admin panels, hidden staging servers, or rogue applications left live by mistake. So I ran my usual setup: VPN, air-gapped laptop, custom sandbox environment. If anything decided to lash out, it wouldn't touch my real system. I connected. The site loaded instantly. A black screen, no HTML header, just one line of glowing green text, center aligned like an old terminal. "We see you." I laughed. Figured it was a joke. Maybe one of those creepy ARG rabbit holes that got tossed around deep web forums. I'd seen hundreds of like it. But then the site blinked, and the text changed. "Welcome back, Jonah." I froze. I hadn't entered my name. I hadn't even logged into anything yet. I ran a scan. No cookies, no local storage, no tracking scripts. My real IP was masked. My system name was generic. There was no way this site should have known who I was. The screen blinked again. Proceed. Yes. No. I moved my cursor toward no, but my mouse wouldn't respond. It drifted slowly, unnaturally, toward yes on its own. I yanked the USB power. The screen went black. My sandbox laptop was fried, completely unresponsive. I'd built it to survive state-level intrusions, and this damned 8088 site had cooked it in under 60 seconds. But it wasn't over. That night, things started happening. My phone glitched, flickering static every time I passed a mirror. My smart TV turned on at 3:08 a.m. with no input, displaying lines of green code that flickered for a half second before vanishing. At work, my badge stopped working, even though IT confirmed my credentials hadn't changed. Then, the dreams came. Dark corridors, endless staircases, eyes blinking from the walls. I heard voices calling out numbers, sometimes coordinates, sometimes file paths, and always the same phrase: "Do not interact." I reached out to an old friend, Z, a retired sysadmin who now lived off-grid. We used to pull late-night pen testing jobs together in our 20s before he disappeared from everything. He was paranoid, brilliant, and one of the few people I trusted with weird digital shit. I told him everything, except my name and location. Just the behavior, the IP, the port, and the strange fallout. After a long pause, he replied with just 3 words. "You opened it." We arranged a call over an encrypted VoIP tunnel. His voice was raspier than I remembered, like he hadn't spoken to another human in days, maybe weeks. He said something I'll never forget. "That port wasn't meant for you, or anyone. It was sealed years ago." He told me about a rumored project, something from the early internet days.
The next day, I found a USB drive in my coat pocket. I never put it there. It was labeled Port Forward. I don't know what's on it. I haven't plugged it in, but sometimes I hear it hum, like it's calling to something still listening.
The rain that wouldn't stop. Marcus Clay, a burned-out photographer from Phoenix, wanted peace, something quiet, far from the mess of his life. A bad breakup, debt collectors circling, and a creative block that had lasted nearly 2 years. He found the listing online. Cabin in the Graybridge Woods. No neighbors, no amenities, and no phone reception. The kind of place you go to forget. When he arrived, the rain had already started. Not a heavy storm, not lightning or thunder, just a persistent, gentle drizzle, like the sky couldn't stop weeping. He didn't think much of it, Oregon weather, he assumed. But it didn't stop. Not that night. Not the next day. Not once in 6 straight days. It whispered against the roof and soaked the ground until the forest floor turned to black sludge. Marcus tried to keep his mind busy, walks with his camera, journals, meditating. But something about the silence gnawed at him. It wasn't just the rain. It was the absence of everything else. No bird song, no squirrels in the trees, no wind rustling the branches, just that constant soft patter. He first noticed the footprints on the 3rd day. Tiny, barefoot, child-sized prints in the mud. 1 set, then 2, then 3, circling the cabin, always vanishing at the tree line. He didn't hear anyone, didn't see anyone, but the prints kept coming. They paused outside the window near his bed. On the 4th night, he heard scratching beneath the floorboards. At first it was soft, like raccoons maybe, but it became a rhythm. Tap, tap, scrape. Tap, tap, scrape, as if someone or something was carving patterns beneath his bed. Marcus didn't sleep. He lay awake in the dark with his flashlight clenched like a weapon. The 5th morning, he went into town. Graybridge was little more than a diner and a gas station. Inside the diner, the waitress, a hollow-eyed woman with graying hair, poured him coffee and asked if he was staying up on the ridge. He nodded. Just a few days, place is quiet. She said, "You hear them yet?" "Hear what?" he asked. "The children." She didn't say anything else, just walked away. That night, the dream came. He was lying in bed, but the rain had stopped. The silence was thick, like it was pressing against his eardrums. He turned his head, and there they were. 3 children standing by the window, their skin pale, eyes solid black, smiling. When he woke up, the window was open. Muddy footprints trailed across the wooden floor, and the rain hadn't stopped. He locked the door, boarded the windows, slept with a knife, but they came anyway. On the 7th night, he heard whispers, a soft chorus of children's voices calling from outside. "Come out, come play, we miss you." He opened the front door, gripping his knife. The rain was pouring now, a torrent, but in the center of the clearing stood one of the children, a small girl, her face blank, hair matted to her skull. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Only rain. Then she turned and ran into the woods. Something inside Marcus broke. He chased her. Branches whipped his face. His shoes sank into the mud, but he followed her into the dark. The trees closed in. The rain was louder than ever. He finally found her standing at the edge of a pit, a perfect circle of water, black as oil. The girl pointed. "Down," she whispered. Marcus looked and saw his own face floating beneath the surface. Then hands pulled him in. They found his cabin weeks later. Still locked, still sealed, camera on the table, lights still on, but no one inside. Only muddy footprints circling the bed. And outside, the rain continued. Room 209. Derek Turner worked the night shift at a hotel on the edge of nowhere. It was one of those chain motels that had changed owners a dozen times and still smelled faintly of mildew no matter how many air fresheners they plugged into the walls. On the surface, it looked normal. 2 floors, 40 rooms, a flickering neon sign out front. But it was the kind of place where people didn't stay long, and some didn't check out at all. Derek had only been working there 3 weeks, covering the graveyard shift, midnight to 8 a.m. Just enough pay to keep the lights on in his apartment, enough quiet to keep his mind off the real mess in his life. He had one job: watch the monitors, check the logs, and don't fall asleep. The lobby was always empty after 11. He'd pass the time scrolling his phone, reading conspiracy threads, or staring into the CCTV feeds on the black and white monitor array. There was something soothing about the silence. Until room 209 lit up. He noticed it one Thursday night, just after 2 a.m. The monitor that showed the hallway on the second floor flickered slightly, and then blinked to life. Room 209's door opened slowly. But here's the thing, room 209 didn't exist. The hotel had an odd floor plan. Rooms 200 to 208 lined the east wing. Rooms 210 to 220 were on the west. There was no room 209. There never had been. Even the room keys skipped it. Derek leaned closer, squinting at the monitor. The door, clearly marked 209, was wide open. Inside, only darkness. The light didn't reach past the threshold. It was like looking into a black hole. He clicked through the monitor controls, thinking maybe it was a glitch. Maybe the camera was showing a mirrored image or looped feed. But then, someone stepped out. A woman. She was barefoot, wearing a thin hospital gown, damp and clinging to her skin. Her hair hung over her face, long and tangled, and her arms hung limp at her sides. She walked slowly down the hallway. No sound, no footsteps, no shadow. She reached the end of the hallway and turned toward the camera. Derek's stomach twisted. Her eyes were gone, just deep black sockets, and her mouth was open, far too wide, almost unhinged. She raised her hand, pale and bony, and pointed directly at the camera. The feed cut to static. Derek sat frozen, staring at the screen. He checked the guest log. No one had checked in since 8 p.m. The east wing, where room 209 supposedly was, had all empty rooms. The cleaning staff had been through earlier. Nothing abnormal. He grabbed his flashlight and master key. Something about her eyes, or lack thereof, had burned into him, like she'd been looking through the screen, right at him. He took the stairs 2 at a time. The east hallway was dead quiet, the carpet muffling every step. He passed room 207,
then 208. A blank wall. Then room 210. No room 209. No door. No outline. Just the stretch of faded wallpaper. But the hallway was cold. Too cold, like the air conditioning had gone into overdrive. And it smelled. A strange mixture of mildew, copper, and something sweet and rotten underneath. He turned back toward the stairwell, only to find the hallway had gotten longer. Another door stood at the end now, a door labeled 209. It hadn't been there seconds ago. The light above it flickered, casting shadows that didn't match the shape of the walls. His keycard inched toward his hand on its own, like muscle memory or something deeper. He didn't want to move forward, but his legs disobeyed. He slid the key into the lock. The door opened. Darkness spilled out like fog. Inside was not a hotel room. It was a hallway, longer than the building should allow. Walls of dripping cement, the sound of water echoing from nowhere. No windows, no light fixtures, just the dull pulse of red emergency bulbs spaced too far apart. He stepped inside. Behind him, the door slammed shut. He turned, gasped, no door, just the same endless corridor behind him. Somewhere in the dark ahead, a dragging sound echoed. Then, the whispering began. Low at first, like someone muttering behind the walls, but it grew louder, layering dozens of voices, then hundreds, crying, pleading, choking. He ran. No matter how fast he moved, the hallway never ended. The lights faded one by one behind him. Every few seconds, he saw shadows dart past the edges of the walls, too fast to see clearly, but he could feel them watching. The dragging sound grew louder, closer. Then he saw her. At the end of the corridor, backlit by red, the woman stood still, her head tilted at a sharp, unnatural angle. Her arms twitched, then her mouth opened again, wider, impossibly wide, and she began to scream. Only no sound came out. The walls shook, the floor cracked, and the shadows rushed toward him. He woke up in the lobby. Lying behind the desk, his shirt soaked and his hands covered in something sticky. It was still dark out, still raining outside. He pulled himself up and looked at the monitors. Room 209 was gone again. Just a blank wall on the second floor. He never reported what happened. When asked by the morning manager why the front door was left ajar and why he looked pale as a corpse, Derek just said he hadn't slept well. He lasted 2 more shifts before quitting. They say room 209 shows up every few months, only at night, only on the monitors, and always for someone working alone. The cleaning crew doesn't go up there anymore. No one does. But every now and then, a guest asks a strange question at check-in. Is the woman in the hallway part of the decor, or is she real?
The woman on the overpass. Drivers said they saw her late at night. Always the same. A pale woman in a black dress standing alone on the old Cedar Creek overpass, staring down at the road beneath her. Never moving, never speaking, just standing perfectly still, like a statue. People said she was a ghost, the remnant of a suicide, or maybe something even older than that. Most of them laughed it off. Just urban legend. Until Jacob Glass saw her. He was a long-haul trucker, working his way up the northern stretch of I-15 through Montana on his way to Spokane. Jacob didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in coffee, flat tires, bad weather, and GPS signals that always died when you needed them most. It was raining that night. Not a storm, just a cold, steady drizzle that blurred the windshield and made the road feel slick and endless. Jacob had his thermos between his legs, a crumpled bag of sunflower seeds in the console, and late-night radio whispering something about traffic conditions on the I-90 hundreds of miles away. He wasn't thinking about ghost stories until the overpass appeared. It jutted out of the trees with no warning, an old stone structure coated in moss and shadow. Jacob slowed as he approached. His headlights swept up and froze. There she was. A woman. Mid-30s maybe, long black dress that moved ever so slightly in the breeze, hair soaked, clinging to her face. She stood at the center of the overpass, directly above the highway, and she was staring right at him. Jacob's foot lifted from the gas pedal. The eyes were what did it. Even from the cab, even through the storm and fog, he could feel them. Cold, empty, not angry, just hollow. And yet somehow still aware, as if they saw something in him no one else did. He drove under the overpass. In the mirror, the woman hadn't moved. He tried to forget it, blamed it on exhaustion, hallucination, maybe some local performance artist trying to freak people out, but that night, in his motel room outside Spokane, he dreamed of her. He was standing at the edge of the overpass, rain pouring. A truck roared towards him on the highway below. She stood beside him, whispering. He couldn't hear the words, just felt them. When he woke, his pillow was soaked, not sweat, rainwater. He told himself it was a coincidence. The next time he saw her was a week later. A different highway, different state, but there she was. Same overpass, same woman, same stare. And again, when he passed beneath her, something in him twisted, like a cord being pulled too tight inside his chest. After that, she started appearing more often. Sometimes she was on overpasses, sometimes at gas stations, standing just beyond the edge of the lights. Once, he saw her reflection in his side mirror as he drove through Nevada, a shape in the shadows of the trailer, smiling faintly. He tried telling a coworker, just mentioned the weird sightings, not the rest. The guy laughed, made a joke about ghosts hitchhiking. Jacob laughed too, but he was drinking more now, sleeping less. Every time he closed his eyes, he dreamed of standing beside her. Every time he passed under an overpass, he glanced up, and she was always there. The final time came at 2:46 a.m., near a desolate stretch of highway in northern Idaho. Jacob hadn't seen her in a few days. He thought maybe it was over. Maybe it had just been stress or some kind of psychotic break that had finally burned itself out. But when his headlights picked up the overpass again, he felt it in his spine. She was there. Only this time, she was smiling. Her head tilted just slightly, the same way you'd look at a pet that finally understood a trick. Jacob's hands clenched the wheel. He meant to drive straight through, not look, not give her any more of himself. But his body disobeyed. The wheel jerked. The truck veered left, toward the side of the road, and Jacob drove up the embankment, toward the overpass. His body moved like it was following a script he didn't write. The truck stopped, engine still running. Rain tapped on the windshield like fingers. And there she was, just outside the cab, inches away from the glass. She knocked once. He opened the door. They found the truck 2 days later, still idling, parked along the top of the overpass. The cab was empty. No signs of struggle. No blood. No trace of Jacob Glass. The only clue was a set of muddy footprints leading to the railing, and beyond that, nothing but air and rocks far below. But here's the part no one can explain. There was no impact site under the overpass. No body, no broken glass, no disturbed brush. And 2 days later, a new driver passed beneath the same bridge on a foggy night. He looked up and saw a man standing beside the woman. Both of them smiling, waiting. Voices in the static. No one really uses ham radios anymore. That's what Ben Calloway used to say, at least. He was a loner by nature, 42 years old, living alone in a rural Michigan farmhouse that used to belong to his grandfather. Most of the other homes nearby had been abandoned or sold off years ago, so it was just him, the woods, and an ancient shortwave radio rig in his basement. It started as a hobby. Then it became an obsession. Ben liked the idea that even in the dead of night, he could tune into frequencies most people didn't know existed. Sometimes he'd hear storm warnings, old military test broadcasts, or distant chatter from people halfway across the world. He felt like a ghost drifting through forgotten channels. Until the night he found frequency 4419. It happened just after midnight during a heavy snowstorm. The wind howled outside, battering the windows and whistling through the chimney. Ben sat with his usual cup of black coffee, the low hum of his radio console filling the silence. He was tuning through static, bored, when he hit a strange patch. Not a normal hum, but a deep, low-frequency drone, almost like a heartbeat. He paused, adjusted the dial. Then he heard it. A voice. Faint, fuzzy, but clear enough to send chills down his spine. Calling anyone? This is Site Echo. Please respond. I repeat, this is Site Echo. Requesting response. They're watching us. Ben blinked. He scribbled down the frequency, heart pounding. The voice was male, tired and laced with desperation. It sounded live, not pre-recorded, and it was on a dead frequency. The signal crackled and cut out. He stayed glued to the console for hours, but nothing came back. The next night, at exactly 12:44 a.m., the signal returned. Same frequency, same voice. We tried to shut the portal. It didn't work. I don't know where the others are. They... Static. Inside the walls now. Do not come here. Do not look at it. It sees through... Ben leaned forward, his skin crawling. There were other sounds too, things he couldn't explain, like wet flesh dragging across metal, insect wings fluttering inside concrete, things that didn't belong on any sane broadcast. He tried to respond, flipped on his microphone and repeated his call sign. Nothing. The voice never acknowledged him. It just kept reporting, like a man trapped in some purgatory, repeating his horror for anyone who might be listening. Over the next week, Ben barely slept. Every night at 12:44 a.m., the signal returned, and each time, the voice grew more frantic. Sometimes it whispered, other times it screamed. One night, the man begged, "Please, whoever you are, turn it off. It hears through the signal. If you're still listening, it already knows your name." Ben shut off the console that night, sat in silence. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. The next morning, strange things started happening. The basement light flickered whenever he walked past the radio setup. His phone rang once, just static on the other end. He heard voices in his hallway late at night, not inside the house, but under it, like something crawling just beneath the floorboards. One night, he woke up at 12:44 a.m., no alarm, and heard the radio click on by itself. He found the voice already mid-broadcast. "There is no escape. They built it under the ground. They fed it memories. Now it wants more." And then something new. Another voice joined in, higher pitched, not human, repeating a name over and over. Ben, Ben, Ben. He tore the power cable from the wall. The static continued. He drove into town the next day and brought the radio to an electronics recycling center, left it without a word, bought a new TV, replaced every fuse, and vowed never to touch shortwave again. That night, the TV turned on by itself. Not a show, not static, just a pitch-black screen and the same voice. "You're still listening, Ben. You can't stop now. We're in the walls." He unplugged the TV. The voice didn't stop. The last anyone heard from Ben was a voicemail he left for a friend, a garbled message full of pleading and some kind of strange rhythmic noise in the background. Police found the farmhouse days later, front door open, no signs of struggle. But the entire basement had been stripped bare. The concrete foundation had been smashed apart, huge claw-like marks gouged into the stone, leading down into the soil. Ben was never found, but locals say that if you walk the woods behind the house at night and the wind is just right, you can pick up a faint radio signal on your phone. A voice calling for help, and behind it, something else breathing.
The field behind her house. Mara lived alone with her son. The house was old, her grandmother's place, tucked on the edge of a quiet valley in eastern Kansas. The kind of place where land stretched for miles, and the sky seemed to press down on you like a ceiling. The nearest neighbor was over a mile away, and the only thing behind her house was a wide open field. Just acres and acres of waist-high grass swaying in the wind. It used to calm her, that field, until the night her son came back wrong. His name was Ethan, 7 years old, bright, curious, a little too quiet sometimes, but sweet. He loved bugs and puzzles and had a habit of wandering outside early in the morning before Mara even woke up. She warned him not to go into the field alone. Too easy to get turned around, she told him. Too many things you can't see in the tall grass. He promised. But one morning, she woke up, and he was gone. The back door was wide open. No footprints on the porch, no note. Just the field, swaying in the wind like nothing had happened. She called and called, sprinted through the grass until her legs ached, screaming his name. No answer. Just the wind. And then, 2 hours later, he came walking back. Perfectly calm, no scratches, no dirt, no sign of distress. "Mama," he said, "I was just playing." Mara collapsed into him, sobbing. She didn't ask questions, not then, just held him and thanked whatever power had brought him back. But something was wrong. It started small. Ethan wouldn't eat his favorite foods. He didn't laugh the same way. He'd sit in his room and stare at the corner for hours. When she asked what he was thinking, he'd smile too wide and say, "Nothing. Just listening." She chalked it up to trauma. Maybe he'd gotten lost. Maybe he'd imagined the whole thing differently. But at night, she began to hear him whispering to someone. At first, she thought he had an imaginary friend. But then she caught him in the hallway at 3 a.m., standing completely still, facing the back door. "Who were you talking to?" she whispered. He didn't turn around. "They're waiting," he said, "in the field. They said I can come back soon." Mara grabbed his arm and pulled him away. He didn't resist, just stared up at her with blank, shining eyes. "They want you too." She installed locks on all the doors, started sleeping with a knife under her pillow. The next day, she called a doctor, but the doctor never showed. She found his car at the end of the driveway, driver's door open, engine running. A trail of footprints led from the car into the field. No one ever found him. The whispers got louder. Mara would wake up at night to hear something moving just beyond the walls, brushing along the siding like an animal too large to be real. She saw shadows in the hallway, shapes at the corners of her vision. Ethan stopped sleeping. He'd sit cross-legged in the kitchen, whispering to the window. "The grass is hungry," he said once. "It told me you don't belong here anymore." She tried taking him to town, packed bags, got in the car, but the road never ended. No matter how far she drove, it just circled back to the field. She checked the GPS, it spun in place, refusing to track. The radio played only static. The sky grew darker even at noon. She was trapped. They both were. One morning, Mara woke up to silence. No wind, no birds, no sound at all. Ethan was gone again. She ran to the back porch. The grass was gone.
In its place stood a perfectly circular hole stretching far into the earth. It wasn't dug. It was smooth, like something had melted the ground away. The dirt around it was wet, breathing. From the bottom, she heard Ethan's voice. "Come see, Mama, it's beautiful." She screamed, threw rocks, called the police again, but her phone didn't work. No one came. No one ever came. Later that night, Mara found footprints in the kitchen. Muddy, barefoot, too large to be Ethan's. They led from the back door to the basement. She never opened the door. She just nailed it shut. But sometimes, late at night, she hears it trying to open. Something clawing softly against the other side. It sometimes says her name. Sometimes it uses Ethan's voice. The field is still there, still swaying in the wind, even when there is no wind. No one visits Mara anymore. No mail, no cars. The road in has cracked and broken, overtaken by vines. But if you walk close enough to the edge of the field, you might hear whispering. And if you step inside, even just a little, it will remember your name.
The neighbors were hiding something, but I found out too late. True Crime Horror Story. Part 1. The Backyard Secret. It started with a missing boy. 5 years ago, my next-door neighbor Charles came knocking. Face pale, hands trembling. His 14-year-old son had vanished. It hit the news, made the rounds on TV, and our quiet neighborhood changed overnight. My wife and I did what we could, offered food, support, prayers, but as time went on with no leads, no body, no closure, the sympathy turned to uneasy silence. Charles and his wife, Kathy, were never the same. She stopped speaking entirely during barbecues. He always looked over his shoulder like someone was watching. I figured grief did that to a person. But then came last week. I was taking out the trash when Charles approached me, quiet, twitchy. He asked to borrow a shovel. No questions asked, I handed over my best one. He said he had yard work, but curiosity got the better of me. So when I went upstairs, I glanced out the window. Charles wasn't gardening. He was digging a hole, a deep one. Something about the way he dug made me uneasy. So I went over, shovel in hand, offering help. He snapped, his whole face twisted into something I didn't recognize. "No, I will not let you use that shovel in my yard. Leave." That tone wasn't just defensive. It was desperate, like I'd interrupted something I wasn't meant to see. Later that night, around 1:30 a.m., I heard metal scraping against dirt. I snuck outside. Charles was digging again, harder this time, frantic. When he went inside for a moment, I crept into his backyard. The hole was deep, and sticking out of the bottom was the corner of a black garbage bag, torn, revealing a foul smell that turned my stomach. I ran before he returned. The next morning, the hole was gone, patched perfectly, and his SUV no longer in the driveway, but parked oddly on the street, as if ready to leave at a moment's notice. I can't prove what he was burying or unburying, but ever since that night, Charles won't speak to me. He avoids eye contact, And 2 days ago, I looked out my window and caught him staring into mine from his house. Middle of the day, eyes unblinking. He never returned my shovel.
Part 2. The Boys Next Door. When I was 15, we were weeks away from moving out of my childhood home. The kids next door, Eric and Todd, were the type no one talked to. Everyone just avoided them. One day, Todd came over while my brother and I were shooting hoops. He was odd but friendly, asking if the rumors about us moving were true. Then he invited us to shoot BB guns with him and Eric down by the river. Something felt off, but I agreed. We didn't tell our parents. The next day, the boys showed up dressed like soldiers, camouflage, boots, a duffel bag that clinked ominously as they walked. When we got to the woods, Todd unzipped the bag and handed me and my brother what looked like BB guns until he said they were real. Eric pulled out a loaded pistol and started firing into the trees. I froze. Then I snatched the gun from my brother's hand, threw it in the bag, and told them we were leaving. Todd's face went blank, then cold. Eric muttered something under his breath. That night, I woke up to a cold breeze. My window, which I never left open, was wide, and I felt something, metal, pressing against the back of my head. A whisper came from behind me. "Tell anyone, and I'll kill your whole family." It was Todd's voice. I said nothing. I didn't move. He slipped out the window. For the next few weeks, they watched us. Every night, one of them would be at a window, staring, never blinking. Then one night, Todd threw a rock at my window and pointed a gun up at me. I ducked, ready to die. But laughter echoed from the street. They were playing with me. A sick game. We moved a week later. We never told anyone, not even our parents. I don't know where they are now. But some nights, I wake up with that cold breeze again. Part 3. The Woman Under My Bed. After college, I moved into a cheap house. Rent was dirt low, and the reason was obvious. On one side, a party house. On the other, a nightmare. An older woman in her 60s lived with a younger woman, possibly her daughter, who clearly had severe mental issues. I'd often sit on my porch and watch scenes unfold. The younger one would rock back and forth, arms folded tight, muttering, sometimes pointing at me and screaming. The older one just stared. One night, their screaming was too much. I had work in the morning, so I marched over and knocked. The old woman opened the door and snapped, "What the hell do you want?" I asked, politely, to keep the noise down. Behind her, the younger woman charged forward screaming, "How dare you!" The door slammed in my face. But afterward, they went silent. At 3 a.m., I woke to a noise downstairs. I checked, but found nothing. I went back to bed. Then I felt it, a breath on my face, something cold and wet brushing my cheek. I opened my eyes and turned on my phone flashlight. There, at the edge of my bed, was a face, the younger woman's face, contorted and wild, staring at me from under the frame. When the light hit her, she screamed. So did I. She chased me out of the room. I barely managed to slam the door and lock it. When the police came, she was still screaming, still pounding at the door. The older woman pleaded with the cops not to take her. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no. But the way the older woman glared at me, pure hate. Something told me this wasn't the end. Later that night, I saw her car drive away, but she still lives next door. And some nights, I hear scratching at my wall.
Part 4. The House Across the Alley. Section 1. New place, old feeling. I moved into my new home at the beginning of September. A narrow, 2-story townhouse tucked into the edge of a long alleyway that cut behind a row of older properties. It was the kind of place a landlord called a fixer-upper with charm, which really meant mold in the basement and drafty windows. But for me, it was affordable. After losing my job and clawing through months of job hunting, I needed somewhere cheap, quiet, somewhere I could reset. It was quiet, all right. Too quiet. There's something unnerving about moving into a neighborhood where no one greets you, where you never see anyone walking their dog or taking out the trash. In the first 2 weeks, I never saw a single neighbor face to face. Just cars pulling into garages, shadows behind curtains. Still, I figured it was a working-class neighborhood. Maybe people kept to themselves. Then I noticed the house directly across the alley from mine. It stood just a little too still, too dark at night. The yard was clean, but sterile, like someone mowed the lawn out of habit, not care. The blinds were always shut, but behind them, I sometimes caught movement. A flicker of light, a shape stepping back from the window, a sense that someone was watching. Section 2. The Man in the Window. I remember the first time I actually saw him. It was after midnight. I was in my upstairs office, catching up on freelance work. My desk faced the window, and across the alley, that house was lit with a faint yellow glow, like a dying bulb. And standing at the second-story window was a figure. A man, tall, thin, still as a statue. He was just staring, not at the street, not at the sky, at me. I froze. For maybe 10 seconds, we locked eyes. Or I assumed we did. Then, just as slowly, he stepped back into darkness and disappeared. I pulled the curtains shut, told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was just looking out, same as me. But the next night, I looked again, and he was there. Every night after that, same time, same place, watching. Section 3. The Disappearance. A few days later, I saw someone different. A woman. She looked younger than the man, maybe mid-30s, short brown hair. I saw her through the kitchen window one afternoon while I was watering the plants on my patio. She stood at the edge of the alley, holding a bag of trash, looking up and down the street like she was waiting for something. When our eyes met, she looked startled, then relieved. She gave me a small wave. I nodded politely and turned away, not sure what to make of it. But there was something in her face I couldn't shake, like she'd just seen land after drifting at sea. I never saw her again. Section 4. Something in the basement. 2 nights later, I heard the sound for the first time. It started as a low thud, not the kind of noise you hear and write off. This was deliberate, rhythmic, like something striking the floor with force. It was coming from the house across the alley. I opened my bedroom window, careful to stay hidden. The lights were off in that house, but the noise kept going. Thud,
Pause. Thud. Thud. Pause. Then it stopped. I strained my ears. Nothing. Then, very faintly, came a sound I can only describe as breathing. Heavy, animal-like gasps. Then something dragging. Something being moved. I shut the window. Section 5. The package. The next day, I got a package. No return address. Just a brown cardboard box, taped sloppily, sitting on my front step. I didn't order anything. I brought it inside, cut the tape, and opened it. Inside was a small plastic doll, dirty, old, with its left eye missing, and beneath it, a photograph. The picture showed a basement, gray concrete walls, exposed pipes, a single bulb hanging from a wire. In the center of the room was a cot. On the cot, a woman, bound, gagged, eyes wide with terror. And in the corner of the photo, that man, standing, watching the camera, smiling. I dropped the box, stumbled back. My heart pounded so loudly I couldn't hear my own breath. I called the police. They took the box, questioned me, asked if I was playing a prank. I told them about the house across the alley, about the man, the noises, the woman I'd seen. They said they'd look into it. They didn't. Section 6. Evidence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window with my phone, waiting. Around 12:17 a.m., the man appeared again, standing in his window. But this time, he raised his hand and waved. Slowly, precisely. Then he pointed, not at the alley, not at the sky, at me. I backed away. I was being hunted. I knew it in my gut. So I did what I hadn't done before. I walked across the alley, crossed onto his property, and peeked through the side basement window. What I saw made me gasp. A cot, a chain bolted to the floor, and someone, something under a tarp, twitching. My foot slipped. The gravel shifted. I ducked. A light came on inside. Then I heard the back door creak open.
Subscribe to Dr. Nightmare channel now.
Story 4. The Puzzle Box. I've always had a thing for puzzles. Not just jigsaws, but codes, riddles, ciphers. Anything that made my brain ache and stretch. As a kid, I was the one who solved the newspaper Sudoku faster than my parents could find their coffee. I wasn't athletic or social, but give me a locked door, a series of symbols, or a pattern no one else could see, and I was in my element. By the time I reached my late 20s, I was deep into what most people would call advanced cryptography. But what I really specialized in was hidden systems, layers behind layers, Easter eggs, defunct domains, sites swallowed by the web's undercurrent. Most of it was harmless fun, unlocking forgotten websites, finding ARGs created by bored programmers, deciphering dead URLs that looped back into themselves like digital Mobius strips. But in late October of 2016, I stumbled upon something that didn't want to be solved, something that was never meant to be touched. It began when I found a comment buried in the source code of an abandoned webcomic site. The comment read, "If you've come this far, you've already opened the first door. See what lies beneath. Vector.black/pb-entry." It was an unlisted link, dead to most search engines. Just text, no images, no style sheets, no formatting, a blank white page with a single prompt: enter your name. I hesitated. Usually these things asked for usernames, maybe an alias, but this was different, personal. Curious, I typed Aaron. The page blinked once, then loaded what looked like an ancient text adventure game interface. Welcome, Aaron. Do you wish to play? There was a yes and a no. I hovered over no just to see what would happen. The moment my cursor touched it, the screen glitched and turned black. Static filled the speakers. Then the screen pulsed red and displayed, "That's not an option anymore." I clicked yes. The screen shifted. A diagram of a box appeared. Black lines etched into a white cube, symbols on each side, runes, clock hands, and strange geometric spirals. Below it, a prompt read, "Solve the box." At first, it seemed simple. You clicked the sides of the cube, rotated them, and aligned the symbols in a particular order, but each solution revealed a new layer, more complex than the last. Every time I thought I'd cracked it, the game changed. It was intelligent. It learned how I solved. It adjusted. The difficulty wasn't linear. It evolved. After 3 hours straight, the background began to fade into something darker. The symbols no longer felt abstract. They started to look familiar, like diagrams from old religious manuscripts, like something ancient was watching me through the code. But I couldn't stop. It had its hooks in me. Eventually, I solved what I thought was the final configuration. The cube cracked open. The screen flashed black and white like a strobe. Then a message appeared. The box has opened. Thank you for playing, Aaron. Coordinates: 38.8972 north, 7.0369 west. 1 hour. Come alone. Bring nothing. I stared at the screen. Those were real coordinates. I checked Google Maps. It pointed to a narrow alley in Washington, D.C., just behind a condemned theater that had been shut for years. I lived in Baltimore. It was only an hour away by car. I should have ignored it. I should have laughed, called it a brilliant prank by some hacker genius who had crafted the ultimate ARG. But deep inside, I felt something shift, like I'd just unlocked something I was never supposed to see. And worse, I felt watched. I closed my laptop, packed a hoodie, and drove. It was past midnight when I arrived. The city was quiet. Fog curled along the pavement. The alley was narrow and dark. A metal gate leaned off its hinges. Beyond it, I found a wooden crate, no bigger than a shoebox, sitting perfectly centered in the path. It had no markings, just a burnished black surface covered in a thin layer of dust. I picked it up. It was cold, much heavier than it looked. I took it home. That was mistake number 2. Once inside, I set the box on my desk and examined it. No hinges, no seams, just a perfectly smooth cube of dark, almost obsidian-like material. But when I touched it, it responded. Faint glowing symbols flickered beneath the surface, only visible from certain angles. I couldn't stop staring at it. That night, I had dreams. I stood in a vast circular chamber filled with hundreds of identical boxes, each pulsed with a low hum, like a mechanical heartbeat. Something moved among them, tall, faceless figures, cloaked in black, whispering in a language that made my ears bleed even in sleep. When I woke, my nose was bleeding. I should have thrown it away. Instead, I opened my laptop and went back to the site. It was gone, totally wiped. But the box was still on my desk, humming faintly. Over the next few days, things got worse. The lights in my apartment began flickering, always in the presence of the box. Electronics misfired. My phone would glitch, showing pictures of people I didn't know, blurry, twisted faces in dark rooms. The temperature dropped, not just inside me. I felt it. The presence. Whatever had been locked in that digital construct, it had crossed over. Not physically, but through attention, through solving, through understanding, I had been its final key. The dreams turned into visions, waking ones. I'd blink and the world would stutter like a scratched DVD. People's faces would smear, words on signs twisted into symbols from the box. I began hearing whispers when no one was around. They always said the same thing: turn the box. And one night, when I finally did, it opened. Not physically, but somehow my mind entered it. I was no longer in my apartment. I was inside a structure, mechanical yet alive, walls shifting, rooms pulsing with breath. It was infinite, a maze of dimensionless corridors lined with faces trapped behind glass, all screaming silently. And in the center, something waited. It had no name, no face, just a form made of language, of logic. It spoke in riddles, in numbers that rearranged themselves into memories I'd forgotten. It knew everything about me, every fear, every lie, every unsolved question that had haunted my life. And it demanded more. The box wasn't a puzzle. It was a gateway. And I had been the solution. When I came to, hours had passed. My nose was bleeding again. So were my ears. And the box was gone. Not missing. Gone. Like it had never been there. But I wasn't the same. Something had stayed behind. Something inside. Now, when I walk past screens, they flicker with symbols, puzzles no one else sees. I hear voices and static. If I hold my breath long enough, I can still feel the walls of that place. And every few nights, someone leaves a small square package outside my door. Always the same weight, always cold to the touch. I don't open them anymore, but I know what they are: invitations. Each box is meant for someone else. I wasn't the first. I won't be the last. And the worst part? A small part of me still wants to solve them. But I won't, because now I know some puzzles solve you.